Welcome into the Viva Alberto's podcast. As always, I am your host, Jake Wood, and joined with me tonight is fellow writer Gabe Simons, and we are also joined by our special guest tonight. His name is Matt Pauley. You can hear him as the pre and post host for 1120 KMOX, and he is also on the Cardinals Radio Network. You can also hear him Redbird Rush Hour 5 to 6 Monday through Friday on 1120 KMOX or 104.1 FM, as you guys are now on. You can also hear him on Sports Open Line. Occasionally he fills in for Tom Ackerman, Sports on a Sunday Morning. So you can literally hear Matt Pauley noon to night, anytime you want, basically at any time. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. How you doing tonight? And happy end of spring training.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, fellas. Really appreciate it. And we're recording this on Sunday night. The Cardinals played their final Grapefruit League game Sunday afternoon. They'll play one more game in Springfield to wrap up exhibition play. But it's, man, we are so close to opening day, and I'm excited. There's nothing better than getting the baseball season started. And like most people probably listening to this, everybody's ready for Thursday.
For sure. And speaking of Thursday, let's just jump right into it, right? So Matthew Liberatore gets the start on opening day against the team that drafted him 17th overall in 2019 and the Tampa Bay Rays. He's added a new splitter, right, this offseason. What are your expectations, Matt, for Libby in 2026?
Yeah, I think he takes another step forward compared to last year. We've seen, I think there's power and just being able to go into spring knowing that you're going to be a starter. Because you remember last year in spring, it really wasn't decided that he was going to be into the rotation until late in spring. He was going in to be stretched out, but there was still a distinct possibility that he was going to end up as a relief piece. So he comes into spring this year. He absolutely knows he's going to be a starter. I think he knew he was essentially going to be the opening day starter from day number one before spring training even started. I think the narrative was it's either going to be Liberatore or May, and Liberatore's the guy who was around last year, so it made sense for him. He is, I want to be careful in how I say this because he is a legit good guy, and I don't want this to come off as anything but that. But he's carrying himself a little bit differently this year, just in the sense that you're around him and you know that this guy's one of the leaders on the team and he's going to be trying to lead the rotation. So I'm not sitting here telling you that this guy's going to be in the Cy Young Award conversation or anything like that, but I do think he takes a step forward compared to last year. I think he's a guy who gives you a chance to win every fifth day. I think he's somebody that maybe doesn't run into that wall that he ran into last year because he's coming off a full season as a starter and he's going to be able to push those innings a little bit further than last year. So I feel good about the rotation in general, and I know we'll probably get into that a little bit more, but specifically about Matthew Liberatore, for where this team is at right now, he's the perfect guy to be your opening day starter.
And I want to point out the last time Liberatore faced Tampa Bay, he threw 8 scoreless innings with 7 Ks and no walks. And that was when he was struggling, but his stuff played up against Tampa Bay because he was a little amped because they traded him. So hopefully we see something similar on opening day. Has anything in spring training made you more or less pessimistic about Ivan Herrera at catcher?
That's a good question. So we haven't seen enough to really, but honestly, if he would have been 100% healthy coming into spring, I probably would be answering this question the same way, because I just don't think things that happen in Grapefruit League games are really, outside of it looking terrible. If it looked terrible, then I would have said I don't feel as good about it. But no matter how good he would have looked behind the plate during spring training games, I don't think that would have changed my opinion on him. I very much leave open the possibility, because one of the things the Cardinals are trying to do with him is they're trying to basically make up for the mistakes they made earlier, because they didn't have a catching curriculum for minor league catchers, which is an insane thing to say, but they did not have a catching curriculum. They now do. They're trying to go back in time basically and run some of their major league catchers through this curriculum that the minor league catchers are now getting. That's a really tough thing to do on its own merit. Add in the fact that Herrera went through an offseason where he wasn't full go in terms of throwing. They tried to completely reprogram his throwing motion without him really being able to throw in the offseason. Everything he's done behind the plate in spring, I think has looked fine. I'm not trying to be dismissive of it. I leave open the possibility that this stuff that they're trying to run him through can be very, very impactful. So, but I don't. I have a hard time saying that this is going to work or it's not going to work. I'm not trying to avoid the question. I just don't think we have that information. What startles me more is he has not shown the ability to stay healthy and catch all at the same time. And he is, in my opinion, he is the most important bat for the Cardinals this year. If he goes down for the same amount of time that he went down last year, then that's a problem. And I already don't totally know how this team is going to score runs. That would just add to that much more. So one of the questions the Cardinals have to be asking themselves is it worth it to put him behind the plate? Oliver Marmol talked about this past week, and they don't want to go away from him catching. They still like the idea. They think he's too young to not have a position, so they're going to continue to go down this path. I would just be concerned that he hasn't shown the ability to stay healthy. He's gotten a little bit banged up here in spring. At some point in time, you lose the ability to get full value from Ivan Herrera if he's not catching. So I don't know if that really answered the question you gave me, but that's kind of my overall take on Ivan Herrera.
And kind of to follow up on Herrera a little bit, like, so, we heard Chaim in some interviews with Tom that he does on Sunday mornings, his regular spot, talking about how this was never something that was anticipated to, be defined in spring training. This was always going to run into the regular season. And, I guess my question would be is like, if you were in Chaim's shoes, would it be better to chase the value or play it safe and benefit from the offensive production? Because, like you referenced, the catch-22 is if he's staying behind the plate, he's more valuable. Like, the bat is more valuable from that position, but if he's not healthy and that position is causing him to not even be on the field in the first place, and you're not getting any value. So, like, is it better to go all risk reward, or is it better to play it safe and just, lean into the safe aspect of his profile as like a really good hitter?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And then you go back to the things that Chaim has said very often, that for this year's team, when they've got an opportunity to make a decision that's going to have a bigger long-term impact versus a kind of a contrasting decision that's going to have a bigger short-term impact, that they are going to choose the long-term, that's what part of this season is for. So we can look at that in two separate ways. We can look at it as, well, long-term. If you keep Ivan Herrera as a catcher, then he has a position, there's a lot of value, there's a lot of flexibility that goes along with it. That's all great. But let's look at it from the other long-term perspective. There's a lot of dudes on the way. Jimmy Crooks had a chance to make the team this year. It didn't happen, but we'll see him at some point. Leo Bernal's going to be right there. Reynel Rodriguez is not far behind him. What's really the long-term possibility of Ivan Herrera being a catcher for the Cardinals 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line? So, and I view Herrera as a guy that they're not looking to trade, that is going to be a part of this core moving forward. If he was somebody that maybe was going into, his final control year or something, well then, yeah, absolutely, you keep him catching because that's going to increase trade value. That's not a thing here. I think they want to do right by him. He wants to catch. He came up as a catcher. It means a lot to him that he is catching. That plays into this as well. But it's a good question, and I just think you can look at it from so many different ways. If you're only worried about the short term, then you're not catching him at all, and you're just making sure his bat is in the lineup every single day. If you're thinking about the long term, that's when we get into all that other stuff about how much value is there actually for him as a catcher in the Cardinals organization when you have so much coming behind him.
So one of the stories of the spring is probably Nolan Gorman isn't really striking out, and he's walking a lot and showing a lot of power. Obviously, spring stats are unreliable, and I don't know. We probably can't trust we can't trust obviously what he's done as gospel, but like strikeout rate does quote unquote stabilize after a certain amount of plate appearances. Do you think Gorman has a decent chance of having an under 30% strikeout rate, or would you think more trust the history?
I think there's still going to be a lot of strikeouts. Now,
sure.
the rate, I don't know. It's going to be a lot, and I think what we've seen in spring is not totally. I believe in the walk. I think what we've seen from a walking standpoint and his ability to get on base, and just the fact that he is making a little bit more contact, I think there's something real there. I don't. When you look at spring stats, like the raw numbers, I'm not into, but I do look at trends. I do look at some of the underlying stuff, and I think the changes we've seen from Gorman are a legit thing. But we've seen, look, there was a period last year, there was like a 6-week period last year where he was the best hitter on the team. People forget that because you look at the final numbers and you look at his final 3 weeks or so, and it was a terrible finish to the year, and you add in the fact that he finally got an opportunity to play a lot third base when Arenado went down last year, and it just makes it feel like last year was a lost season for him. There's been multiple times in his career that he has shown kind of what he's shown in spring. I think to your point, the strikeouts are a little bit less this year in spring than they've been before. I would think I'm not going to sit here and give you the number, try to guess over under on strikeout rate. I think it's going to be better than what it was last year. I don't think it's going to be as good as it is in spring, but I do think the on base is going to be up. He's going to continue to draw walks, and he's going to make enough more contact that I think he's going to be a guy who provides power. He could very easily be the player who hits the most home runs for the Cardinals this year. I think the one thing that's actually, when spring training got started, there was a lot of whispers that third base could be a platoon situation with Gorman and Sajaci. We haven't heard that at all here recently. So I think the Cardinals do believe what we've seen from Gorman in spring is legitimate enough that he's going to go in and he's going to be the everyday third baseman until he proves that he should not be the everyday third baseman.
So I might be stating the obvious, but would you say the goal for Gorman is to minimize his slumps more? Because when he slumps, he's like truly horrendous. And obviously when he's hot, he looks like he could be the best player on the team.
100%. And you minimize slumps by avoiding those periods where, look, there's times where he was striking out 2-3 times a game. And that's when he's going bad, it feels like every single night is either an 0 for 4 or a 1 for 4 with 2 strikeouts. And that's just not. I'm not like most people in baseball now. I'm not a strikeouts are the end of the world guy. But you can't average 2 strikeouts a game. That's just, you can't be at that number, and that's the number he is at when he is really struggling. And those slumps do get prolonged. So I think, Gabe, you're right on. If you can, he's going to go. He's a hot and cold hitter. But if you can avoid those long slumps that just completely, going back to last year. Go look at where his numbers were at going into the final month of the season. They weren't great, but we wouldn't be talking about him the same way that we're talking about him if he would have avoided that final 3-week to a month-long slump that he had last year.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, it's been kind of my favorite stat to highlight this offseason when talking about Nolan Gorman. Gabe, you know exactly what I'm about to reference. It's his weighted runs created plus by month, that stat that Bernie Miklasz likes to, our friend Bernie Miklasz likes to reference. When you go through it month by month, and 100 being league average for WRC plus, this is how it broke down. He was a 76 in March and April. He was a 45 in May, a 142 in June, like you referenced, was really hot in June, 110 in July, 105 in August, and then he was 24 in September. So like that speaks to exactly what you're talking about with those dramatic peaks and valleys and Gorman's performance throughout the months of last season. I guess my question to you would like to follow up on Gorman. If he were to break out have a true breakout season this year, do you think the Cardinals would look at a previous performance like a Tyler O'Neill situation where after 2021 he had that big breakout season, and then whether it be injuries or just lack of performance or inconsistency, like could they use the previous example of a player where they missed the opportunity to sell high on? Is it an opportunity where they look back and say we need to not make the same mistakes of the past, but hey, we've been in this situation before. There's a good likelihood that maybe he does not. We don't believe that he will repeat this again. Is Gorman somebody they would should they continue to invest in if he breaks out, or is it like, hey, this is our opportunity to sell high, let's look to cash in on this asset now?
Yeah. I guess it depends on deep down how real they think it is, right? Because they don't have power, and they need as much as possible. And I don't think you have somebody just immediately walking through the door who's going to go over and play third base that you know for sure is going to give you power. So if they see something, and I think the thing we need to remind ourselves is this staff, this grouping throughout the entire Cardinals organization, in player development, but just coaching and the infrastructure and the data and the technology and everything that's in place right now, it hasn't been in place for a while. And the Cardinals have been absolutely terrible at getting players to become the best version of themselves. So when you give the Tyler, and I'm not trying to put down your comparison here.
Sure.
I think an area where I would push back on it a little bit is it's a very different organization now, where the Cardinals previously were not getting the most out of players. I have confidence, and we'll revisit this a year down the line, 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line for sure, and we can start to evaluate how true this is. But they are putting so much, they're investing so much in trying to make sure that the organization can get players to actually become the best version of themselves. If they think this is real with Gorman, then he's a guy you can build around, especially if they think that this team can be competing at a pretty high level within a year or two after this year in 27 or 28, then I don't think you send him away, because power is it's something that is so vital and so important, and the organization doesn't have a ton of it right now. However, if they do think that this is not sustainable, if they do think that they've got some other people that are on the way that can fill in at third and replicate that, if they think that Gorman's going to fall back at some point, that this is sort of a flash in the pan, 1 year wonder type thing, then yeah, you trade them for sure. And I think the organization's going to be good at making the decisions on who to move on from and who not to move on from. They're not going to bat 100%, but it's well documented that the Cardinals have not been as good on making those type of decisions in recent years. So again, it's not that I feel like I keep not answering questions the way you want me to answer them. I don't know if I'm doing it correctly, but to me, I think it comes down to if the Cardinals actually think it's real or not, potentially what we see if Gorman does have a big year.
Another player who I would consider sort of a sneaky trade candidate because of how close he is to free agency, relatively speaking, is Alec Burleson, especially if Ivan Herrera has to move to first base. I would think they wouldn't want to keep Herrera at DH for good, so they would probably try to find a position, and first base would be the next logical thing for a catcher. Do you think they view Burleson as a core piece who they would extend past the next few years, or do you think they would, let's say, either repeats what he did last year is even better, and then they get some good offers on the trade, and they're like, well, I don't think we're going to keep him past free agency, so we should probably trade him now?
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. I don't know when that would happen for sure, and we know that there's more value for guys when they have a lot of time left. I do think that I really like Alec Burleson. I think he is closer to his ceiling now than a lot of other guys are who have a lot of room for development. We saw, the strides that Burleson made last year were notable and significant. There's a reason he won the Silver Slugger. I think we could see a little bit more power from him this year. I think that's one area that you still have some growth. But for the most part, I think what we see from Alec Burleson is kind of what he is, which is still a really, really good player. But to your point, Ivan Herrera at some point, if he's going to be that core guy on the team, he has to have a position beyond DH, and you want to you've got all those catchers on the way, so it's going to be a question. So yeah, I think at some point in time there is certainly a possibility that trading Burleson could make sense for where the roster's at. I don't think that's a this year thing. I really don't. But at the same time, if the season goes down, I think the Cardinals are going to be more competitive than a lot of people out there think they are. Like I hear from people all the time on Sports Open Line and other things. Oh, this is going to be a 60-win team. Like I don't think people know what a 60-win team actually looks like when they make those kind of comments. Like if you go look at the Rockies from last year, the White Sox from 2 years ago, that's not what the Cardinals are going to be. I'm not saying they're going to be above 500. I'm not saying they're going to be fighting for a playoff spot. I'm not saying any of that, but I am saying that they're going to be a competitive team. They're not going to be this 60-win team. But if all of a sudden they have injuries and things go terribly wrong and like you can't get out of the way of yourself and you are closer to what I just said I don't think they're going to be, could that become a conversation at the trade deadline? Yeah, I think it could. I don't think in all likelihood that's a conversation for this year. I think that's more down the line, especially once they get forced into a position where you have to have a Crooks on the roster, you have to have a Bernal on the roster, you got to figure out a way to have Herrera on the roster. At some point you try to put all those puzzle pieces together, and Gabe just, focusing in on what you just mentioned, I think all that could eventually lead to them potentially moving on from Burleson.
Matt, you have both the envious job, and you also have like a job I'm so glad I don't have to do when it comes to Sports Open Line and having to answer some of those questions, because I will be at work some nights and just like listening to you as I'm finishing my deliveries and stuff, and some of the questions that come across, I'm just like, oh my, Matt is such a professional. I would not have handled that question nearly as well as he did. But I guess where I want to go next is a little bit more controversial, I guess. Let's talk about Jordan Walker, right? He had a really good day today, really strong performance, 3 exit velocities over 100 miles an hour, even hit a home run, 111.3 miles an hour off the bat. The outs were loud. This is going to be a love-hate relationship between Cardinals fans and Jordan Walker and the organization all season long, and it's not going to change that much from previous seasons, I feel like, even though I know that we are getting a lot closer to the end of that rope. I guess my question for you is pertaining to Jordan Walker, like, how much leash... This is the thought on I think on most Cardinals fans' minds, is like, how long is that leash going to be this year? Obviously, with Newt Barr being out for I'm not sure how long exactly, and I'm not even sure the Cardinals realistically know exactly how long at this point. And you also have Josh Baez, who I'm glad they're playing it slow with him and allowing him that time to develop. Like, not only is it what the performance might dictate his future looks like, but also, there's not an immediate player that's really going to push him out of his spot in right field as the roster stands currently. And so, from your perspective, from your seat, from what you know, like, how long do you see that leash being for him this year?
Yeah, I don't think it's an unlimited thing. Like last year, the runway season in many ways turned into a scholarship season for a lot of guys. Not everybody, but for a lot of guys. And I don't think that's what this season is going to be. In fact, the only player on the roster who I think is going to kind of have that scholarship and just going to get run out there every single time is probably Kyle Leahy. And you just have to do that because of the transition. Outside of that, I do think there is going to be more, hey, you have to perform to keep your job. Now, it's not you have a bad week, a bad 2 weeks, and you're out. And that comes to the question that you're asking. I don't know what the number is. I don't know if it's, hey, we get to May 1st and Jordan Walker looks exactly like he looked last year. This is where you finally have to send him down to AAA. I don't know if it's May 1st, if it's June 1st. I don't know when it is. We were talking not that long ago that, hey, is this a guy that if he continues to struggle at this rate, is it guaranteed that he's going to be on the opening day roster? And it became pretty clear that, yeah, he's going to be on the opening day roster, that they really want him to work with the big league staff. And this goes back again to what Chaim Bloom talked about earlier about the decisions having long-term impact versus short-term impact. The Cardinals really feel like it's important that Jordan Walker continues to work with the Major League coaching staff, that they feel like from a development standpoint, he's going to get more out of being with the big league coaching staff. You still have to perform. I think he's going to be the opening day right fielder for the Cardinals. I think he's going to play a lot, but it's got to look better. Now, today it's a single game, and there is no player more than Jordan Walker who we have seen these moments, these games, these series, maybe even weeks, where it feels like it's starting to turn around, and then just at the snap of a finger, it goes back in the other direction. So anybody who makes too much out of a single game, like they're not totally paying attention to what's going on. And I'm not saying that's what you did. I know you're not. I'm just
sure.
I want to preface my statement with it is a single game, and Jordan Walker's track record is these single game performances do not lead to more change. I hope that's wrong. But one of the things is, like, if you look at the home run today, you know what he did? He swung on a pitch that was middle high, and he got it up in the air, and he hit a home run. Going back to Alec Burleson, the most impactful thing that happened with Alec Burleson last year was he learned what not to swing at. And it's not the same profile because Burleson can make contact with anything. Walker seemingly cannot. But it's actually the same result at the end of the day, because when Burleson is swinging at bad pitches, he was getting bad results. So he's making all this contact, but it's not impactful contact coming off his bat. He stopped swinging at a bunch of the stuff that he could make contact with, and just at that same snap of the finger, he all of a sudden becomes a high-level player, a Silver Slugger winner. Like that, almost everything that happened with Burleson last year was connected to him laying off pitches even though he could make contact with them. So for Walker, it's about laying off pitches, and with him, he's not making contact. That's the difference. But if he can stop swinging at the stuff that he shouldn't be swinging at, that's going to be the impactful thing. And I don't have a lot of confidence in Jordan Walker right now. I just don't. I don't know why anybody would. I mean, the numbers are what the numbers are. The hitting profile is what the hitting profile is. But at the same time, I get frustrated when people say, well, they just need to release him. They just need to move on from him. There's never a chance that he's ever going to turn into anything. Like, maybe that ends up being true, but you look at the underlying numbers, and for most players, underlying numbers turn into baseball card numbers. Not all the time. Lars Nootbaar's had incredible underlying numbers for years, and the baseball card numbers have never followed. But when you have elite bat speed, when you hit the ball basically as hard as anybody in Major League Baseball, if you're the Cardinals, especially in a period where you're in a little bit of a non-competitive cycle, well, then you do everything in your power to see if you can turn that guy into that high-level player, because he's got the profile of somebody who can turn into a legit middle-of-the-order, run-producing, all-star caliber bat. That's who he can be. I'm not going to sit here and predict that he's going to become that, but to me, it's malpractice if you just move on from that. So I don't know what it's going to look like this year. He is so incredibly frustrating. And then you add on the fact that he's working so hard. Like, this has been his best year. And I know the Cardinals keep repeating this. People are probably sick of hearing it. But the work that he has put in this offseason into the spring, it has been different. There were questions about how willing he was to make legit changes and do things previously, and I think there was some legitimacy to those questions. I mean, they were even brought up by Ollie and Brant Brown on a Gas House Gang episode last year. That's not the case anymore. This is a guy who's gone all in on trying to fix some of these issues that he's had, and you just root for the guy because you want to see that attitude shift really get rewarded.
Yeah, and just to quickly follow up on an earlier point that you had made, you know, you're not going to overreact to one game that Jordan Walker has, and that's, you know, I tweeted something out similar to that as like, hey, let's not try to put the cart before the horse again. This is good, and you could kind of argue that, like, of any player in camp, Jordan Walker was the one who needed this type of game going into the start of the season to get that confidence back up a little bit, because like you had mentioned, it has been a bit of a grind to this point for him through spring. And so, you know, good vibes can only go so far, but also, like, you could argue that, like, he's the one guy that you needed to have a positive showing heading into opening day.
Yeah, I mean, him and I would put Gorman in that group as well. It's the narrative very similar to where we were at exactly 1 year ago. You got kind of what you wanted to see from Gorman. You haven't seen it from Walker. I think the Cardinals think that he's close. I don't know if I agree with that or not. It's hard to agree with that when you see some of these at-bats. But I don't think they think he's far off. I would be curious to see what it looks like a month in the season. I am worried for his own well-being, though. Like, what happens if you are 3 weeks into the season and you're hitting 130 and you're striking out a ton, and when you do make contact, you are just driving it into the ground over and over and over again? From a mental standpoint, the dude's put so much work in, and like how long do you go until that's just beating you up so much that some sort of decision needs to be made, whether it's giving him a break, whether it's sending him to like whatever. But I want to see him get off to a respectable start to the season, if for no other reason, just to avoid that situation.
Sure.
Do you think that the Cardinals entering spring training were thinking all we need Jordan Walker to do is prove that he's dedicated to making changes, we don't care about the results, and should we possibly be encouraged by the fact that they still plan for him to make opening day, because he probably did whatever they were looking for, unless you think they were always going to have him make the opening day roster, even if he came to camp like, I don't know, 20 pounds overweight or something, and just clearly not trying.
No, I think it's a great point by you, and I don't think it's a coincidence that they never sent him to AAA last year, keeping his final option alive. Like if it's August 1st last year and you burn his option year, that puts you in a different position right now. So I don't think it was a coincidence that they retained the option from last year. I think they were, he moved. He lives in Jupiter. He put a lot of work in. He went to Driveline. He was working out at Cressy's, which is another facility in the Palm Beach area. I don't think it was a guarantee that he's on the Major League roster if he would not have bought in on these changes and things like that. But just like, I know this isn't what you asked, but kind of a sidebar on this, and I think a narrative that needs to get out there a little bit more. People always say, the Cardinals messed him up. The Cardinals tweaked his swing too much. He came up and he was looking good at the beginning of his rookie year, and then the Cardinals messed him up. They didn't. He didn't make the changes. Pitchers started pitching him in a different way, and his swing never changed. Like, go look at his swing from where he was at the beginning to the next year and the next year, and he just didn't make changes. The Cardinals didn't mess him up. The Cardinals were trying to get him to change a little bit. I don't know how successful that would have been. Again, we're at a point now where I'm more confident in the group working with him. But this is not a situation where the Cardinals messed him up years ago. It's a situation where the Cardinals are trying to fix him now, and I do think we're seeing some changes. We need to see more dramatic changes.
Well, I mean, it feels like a good opportunity to go from a young player who has, seemingly gone through the all of the trials that he possibly could, to a young player who is seemingly on a rocket towards an opening day bid at second base. Let's talk about JJ Weatherholt. JJ last season had a .421 on base percentage in 221 plate appearances for AAA Memphis. Overall, across both minor league levels that he played at, had a .973 OPS overall. Would you, Matt Pauley, bat JJ Weatherholt leadoff? And I will add in the context that I know that Ollie Marmol typically does not put young players in leverage positions early on. He likes to slow play them in. Yeah. But I will also add in the caveat that when you listen to the way that Ollie Marmol speaks about JJ Weatherholt and the poise and the acumen and the preparation and just the quality of his at-bats, this is a guy who clearly probably can handle a lot earlier than most rookies coming up. So, Matt Pauley, my question to you is, come opening day on Thursday, will we see JJ Weatherholt batting leadoff for the St. Louis Cardinals?
I don't know if we will or not. I could see a Mason Wynn in that spot. We've seen Ollie bat Wynn in the leadoff spot before. But I think, especially with Lars Nootbaar being injured, I would argue that J.J. Weatherholt is best suited on the roster to hit leadoff for many of the reasons you just mentioned. His walk rate in spring and his ability to draw walks and to make good swing decisions, you could argue it was the best on the team. So I would hit him in the leadoff side. He's not a normal rookie for all the reasons you just mentioned. He is already somebody who they are relying on as being a core part of this team. if they decide that they want to slow play him just a little bit into the regular season and not have him hit leadoff at the beginning of the year for that reason, like that's not something I get angry about. I get it. I understand it. You've got a guy on the team who's hit in the leadoff spot before. That's fine. Like, there's a lot of things to get angry about in life. That's not going to be one that I'm going to get angry about. But do I think J.J. Weatherholt is the player on the roster right now who is best suited to hit leadoff? Yes, 100% I do.
Now, Matt, this is sports. We're supposed to get angry about innocuous things that are involved in the sport. So, like, my favorite saying is, like, fan is short for fanatic or whatever, and we're supposed to overreact to all these things, and I know that we're supposed to be more tempered in our evaluation of these things, but come on, Matt, we're supposed to get angry about things that don't matter.
Well, I've got 162 games to deal
fair.
with anger. We'll keep it mellow here as we are still not quite ready for the start of the regular season.
I'm going to ask you what I think is probably an unanswerable question.
Okay.
But is there a date on the calendar that you can circle and say Joshua Baez will be up by this date? He might be up earlier by performance or injury from the Major League roster, but, like, assuming he doesn't collapse in Memphis, this is the date where I'm like, he'll be in the majors.
I don't have that date, but I will add something to that. I do think if he performs really well at Memphis, his Memphis shelf life was drastically and dramatically reduced by his performance in spring training. I never thought he was going to be on the opening day roster, but when spring training got started, I wasn't convinced this guy was going to get to the big leagues even this year, and if it was going to be late in the season, maybe for him to get that final month cup of coffee as a way to lead him into 2027. Based off what we saw in spring and the fact it got better, like he's not somebody that the numbers went down as he started to face more legitimate big league pitching. The numbers got better until he was finally sent back to minor league camp. So if he shows what he was doing in spring was legit by putting up numbers like that in Memphis, when we're a month plus into the season, depending on what's happening on the big league roster, I think we can start having that conversation on if it's time to go ahead and bring him up. So, again, I don't have a date for you, but I will say I do think he puts himself in position to get to the Cardinals faster because of what he did in spring and how impressive he was.
Our good friend Kareem, I'm not sure how familiar you are with
he's great. He's awesome. I love his minor league stuff. I've sent him a DM every once in a while telling him how much I appreciate some of his stuff. I think he's really, really good.
I think you should have him on if you have the opportunity to do so. Like, he's that good. He deserves that kind of platform. But he talked about how as Josh Baez continued to ascend, his contact rates, like his end zone contact rate, was going up as he was ascending up in levels. And typically that is the inverse for players. As they ascend up, their end zone contact rate continues to go down. His went the opposite direction. So if you want to look at a trend that would portend to him having immediate success as soon as he breaks through to the big league level, that would be one area where, hey, the big question on Baez was, is he going to make enough contact to get to the power to be that presence? And he has clearly shown that he has taken that adjustment that the new regime has put into him, and he's taken that and taken it to the nth degree. And Josh Baez now is knocking on the doorstep as a potential impact player in the near future. And so I wanted to reference that point that Kareem has talked about, because I think it's an important point to really highlight for Josh Baez specifically.
It's a really good point, and I think you see that with high-level hitters. And I'm somebody who spent 2 years broadcasting low-A minor league baseball. My minor league baseball journey included independent ball, low-A, and triple-A, so I've seen just about every level outside of double-A, which actually might be the most entertaining level of minor league baseball. That's the one league the level I didn't work at. But I can tell you that having watched as much low-A baseball as I have in my life, there very few guys can locate pitches. It just does not happen, especially off-speed stuff. You'll have some guys who can locate a fastball, but nobody is locating anything off-speed-wise. And if you are, you're not spending much time at that level at all. So if you're a high-level hitter who just needs to see hittable pitches, and hittable in the sense that they're like actually in the zone, not hittable in the sense that they're bad pitches, it actually gets better as you go up. So you'll see that sometimes high-level hitters. Sometimes you'll see that with like college guys. You got a 22, 23-year-old who's been playing in the SEC as like a fourth outfielder, and then they get drafted late and they end up in the playing low A baseball, and they're facing all these 18-year-olds and they're not seeing a strike, and they just spent a year playing LSU and Alabama, and it's like what's going on here? You'll see it from that profile of hitter sometimes, but certainly for the elite hitters, it can actually get better as you go up levels, and it's a really good point, and something that's worth taking note of.
An initially confusing trade that at least spring training has sort of like, oh, okay, that's why they made the trade. George Soriano had a phenomenal spring. Do you think they are targeting him for maybe high leverage innings? Is that why they made the trade? And they don't trust Granillo, I guess?
I think those are two different things. I don't know if it was so much they didn't trust Granillo, but I also, people kind of batted an eye when they moved on from Granillo, a guy with options. They had put claims in on Soriano other times where I believe the 40-man was full, so they might have been willing to move on from Granillo. May have been the guy who was going to get pushed off the 40-man in one of those spots in the first place. So I like Andre Granillo. I don't think his ceiling is anywhere near as high as a George Soriano. I think Soriano can pitch himself pretty quickly into a high leverage role. I don't think he's going to have it right at the beginning of the year. He's going to have to prove himself a bit. He does have a major league track record, not a huge major league track record, but he does have a major league track record that just is not good. So he's going to have to show something, I think, for a little while where they pick and choose spots for him. But yeah, they love him. They love him. They like the profile. I think they feel like they were able to fix a few things that were not going especially well for him previously. His numbers speak for themselves in spring. It was a really, really solid spring for him. So I like, that right side of the bullpen, like him and Roycroft. I think Roycroft's on track to have a really solid spring or a really solid year as well. I think what we saw from him was legitimate, but they're excited about Soriano. And 2 years ago, and it's funny talking about this guy now because he's getting up AAA and he hasn't been able to put it back together. And he was a Rule 5 guy, so it's not the same thing. But the way they handled Ryan Fernandez, where they started out the year and they were very picky and choosy on where they were going to use him. I mean, he was just kind of stowed away on the bullpen and was only used, break glass in case of fire type thing. And then he just slowly showed that he was somebody you could trust. And by the end of the year, he was in a high leverage spot. I think Soriano can do largely the same thing. I just think it moves a little bit quicker if Soriano has success compared to what happened with Fernandez.
I think it was Chaim who I heard, going back again, referencing the Sports on a Sunday Morning hits that he does with you guys. I think that he talked about how Soriano has that changeup, that actionable pitch against opposite-handed pitching is what kind of made him the separator between him and Granillo, because Granillo has that really good slider and that works really well against same-handed, hitters, but I think the question really became like, does he have something that he could offer to left-handed hitters to get them out? And that wasn't something that was presenting itself as something that Granillo could necessarily get away with, and so that's why they went ahead and made that swap, even if the optionable opportunities for Soriano didn't exactly present themselves. So I think that's kind of the way that he had framed it, and obviously he made them look really smart so far in spring with his performances. So I think it's going to be really interesting to watch how his role expands throughout the season. Going from that bullpen arm to another one that I'm really excited to see. How many saves do you think that Riley O'Brien is going to get this year, and how many do you think it'll be before the deadline? Because I do think that at 31 years old, Riley O'Brien is probably looking at the down, like he's probably close to the end of his peak of his career rather than the beginning of it. And so my thought process with this, and we'll see if Ollie decides to deploy it the same way, but if you're using Riley O'Brien as your ninth inning guy and getting saves, a guy with 4 years of control at 31 years of age, like that is a prime trade candidate. And I think that you talk about high 90s sinker slider, like really, really good high octane stuff that plays in a playoff bullpen in a playoff setting. Is that going to be one of those opportunities where they look to like maximize on an asset? Because we know at the deadline, not only will they have like Jojo Romero and Ryan Stanek as guys they can offer to other teams, but you know, you look at guys who have multiple years of control on top of, you know, their performance in that season, that those generally get more in return. So is that an opportunity where the Cardinals could try to extract max value on a Riley O'Brien?
I think so. Yeah, I think what you just said is spot on. And look, is there a scenario where this team is competing a little bit more, and maybe it's just they try to do what Cincinnati did last year, and maybe they aren't selling as much at the deadline? That's a possibility. That doesn't seem like a super strong possibility. So when I answer these type of questions, I throw in the caveat: hey, if this team does better than people are expecting them to do, maybe you're not looking as much at those type of things. That being said, the bullpen is stacked with guys that they are really excited about who are younger than O'Brien. And I think it makes a lot of sense for him to start the year getting most of those ninth inning opportunities. Matt Swanson is still somebody who is super valuable as a multi-inning guy. And are there going to be scenarios where Swanson maybe gets a 2-inning save covering the 8th and the 9th? Yeah, there's probably some sense in that, especially on a day that O'Brien's off. But I don't think they want to do a lot of up and downs with O'Brien. He's going to strictly be a 1-inning guy, just based off the injury history. The injury history would also scare you about how repeatable year after year after year is he. So if you've got a chance to move on from him and really get something back, and he's having a fantastic season, if it looks the way it looked in the final month of the year last year for O'Brien, he pitches himself into being a really, really valuable commodity. So I think you're right. And then just taking that one step further, I think putting the pieces together of a bullpen that can be successful, it does start with having O'Brien cover a lot of ninth innings, because you do get to hold Swanson for those 2-inning roles. I don't know who the other, last year it was Swanson and Leahy who were really your high leverage multi-inning guys. Leahy's in the bullpen now. In a perfect world, that's probably Graceffo, but he's going to start the year at Memphis, and they'll try to get him stretched back out. The WBC did not do him any favors when it came to that, because they only threw 2 innings in the WBC. But before Graceffo is back, Pashard can cover multiple innings for sure, but I don't think you look at him as being a high leverage guy. So it doesn't totally make sense, but the bullpen works with Swanson being one of your 2 high leverage multi-inning guys. Obviously, Romero, I think he's going to get a save opportunity here and there based off the lane. If you've got some lefties that are going to be coming up in the 9th, he's got a track record in the ability to close out games. How they use Stanek's going to be interesting to me. Are they going to try to keep him out of the 9th inning just because they want to be able to give those opportunities to some younger players, and you kind of know what he has, so he's going to fill more of the role that we saw from Kittredge and Maton over the last couple of years? I lean towards that being a thing, but I also don't totally say that we won't see Stanek in a 9th inning every once in a while. But your initial question was about, could we see O'Brien get moved at the deadline? Yeah, I think that's a distinct possibility.
And I just wanted to follow up really quickly. Sorry, Gabe. You brought up something that clicked in my brain, and you talked about Ryan Helsley. And Helsley was somebody before they made that switch to like having him as a 1-inning only guy in the 9th inning. Do you think that might be a template for what they would look at with Riley O'Brien? Like, hey, let's just put him in the 9th inning and let him do his thing, and that will not only keep him healthy, but it'll also allow him and his body to fall into this consistent routine. Hey, 7th, 8th inning is coming up, I need to do this stretch and this thing to get myself prepared for this opportunity, and that will do it. Like, that will serve its best purpose to keep him healthy and showcase his productivity in the best possible way, which Ollie has demonstrated he's really good at adapting his relievers at doing that.
Yeah, obviously the results have to go along with that decision. If he's not pitching well, then you're not going to keep putting him in the 9th inning. But under the assumption that it looks the way it looked last year, yeah, not only should they do that, they will do that. That has to be the play. That makes all the sense in the world, and there is those final 3 outs, the ninth inning is different than every other inning, and finding guys who can handle that ninth inning and just having the confidence that they know what their role is going to be and their job is to come in and get 3 outs in the ninth, that goes a long way. You mentioned Helsley. Look, I was in Milwaukee working when they converted Hader from being a multi-inning guy to being just a ninth inning guy, and there was other stuff that went along with that as well. Unfortunately, like the arbitration process, there's so much more value in getting saves as opposed to being somebody who can cover multiple innings. So Hader's agent worked with the Brewers, and they figured things out where he was just going to be a ninth inning guy, and then that was going to maximize his ability to make more money. And then after he signed with Houston, he actually said, hey, if they need me to cover multiple innings, I can do it. They haven't used him in that way, but there was a financial tie-in to why he only covered the ninth. But at the end of the day, it is about execution, it is about performance, and I do think you give Helsley's the perfect example. Not this past season where he struggled a little bit more, but the year before, when you do give him that ninth inning and he's just going to be a ninth inning guy, there's value in that. And the other thing about this too, and Helsley did this, a lot of guys do it. You walk into the ballpark every day, you don't always know who's going to be available out of the bullpen. Sometimes you know who's not going to be available because they threw 2 innings the night before, but there are a lot of conversations that happen early in the day when you first get to the ballpark where pitchers say how they're feeling, and then that kind of dictates who's going to be available. So when Helsley was around on days after he pitched, and sometimes on the second day after he pitched, there would always be that conversation. How is he feeling? Is he going to be available? And people sometimes forget that when they watch these games. There's very often where people are yelling about bullpen decisions being made. Well, those decisions are being made because somebody's not available, and that's not going to be shared publicly prior to the game. So I don't know how I got down that track, but there you go.
2 pitchers who are not on the 40-man roster but will be in the bullpen probably at some point are Packy Naughton and Louis Gastelum, if I'm saying his name right. Both of them have turned heads to the extent that a bullpen guy can turn your head in spring training. Sure. Do you think we will see a lot of them this year in the majors, or do you think it'll be like in the case of Gastelum, he hasn't even pitched in Memphis yet, so maybe they give him half a season. But Packy's a vet, and he's already 28, 20 or something like that. Do you think will it be completely determined by injuries to the current bullpen or underperformance, or do you think they could force their way into the roster because they're just pitching too good?
I don't think they're forcing their way onto the roster, if I'm being totally honest. I think something else has to happen to open up the door for them to walk in, because those are 40-man roster moves. And the team, I think, is very, very, very... The Andre Granillo trade be set to the side. I think, generally speaking, this is an organization that's going to be incredibly protective of those 40-man spots. They love Packy Naughton. There is probably no player that you can get Oliver Marmol to light up more about than Packy Naughton. They love him. They really appreciate the spring that he had. I do think they want to make sure that it's real, so he'll go to Memphis. And if he continues to do what he did in Memphis, that he did during the spring, the first opportunity to bring him up where you can make that 40-man move and it makes sense on what you're going to do, I think they're going to do it. The changeup for Gastelum, that's a real pitch. His other stuff, I think he still needs to work on, but that is a major league caliber high level pitch. And that pitch alone can get him to the big leagues. You'd like for him to have some other stuff so guys aren't just sitting on that pitch all the time, where he's got some other things that can work. So I do think his Memphis time goes a little bit deeper to the point that you made. But to the wider question, and I think this is true about relief pitchers across Major League Baseball. You very rarely see a relief pitcher just perform so well that they're pushing their way onto the Major League roster, but you also never see a scenario where there's not a situation that arises where you have to make those changes.
Matt, we're getting close to about an hour here, so we're gonna start winding things down a little bit. But before we go, I did want to ask you about, you do have the privilege tonight of calling the game between the Cardinals and what is effectively going to be the Memphis roster. Because Springfield doesn't break camp for another week or so. you get to call the game with friend of the show, broadcaster for the Memphis Redfords, Alex Coyle. Last year you were with Benji Molina, if I remember that correctly. Yep. What are you most looking forward to the game tonight, and what are you like? Is it Dustin May on the mound that you're most excited about? Like, what are you looking forward to most from the game tonight?
I think there's a non-baseball and a baseball answer. I'll start with the non-baseball answer because I experienced this in Memphis. How much it means to these communities to have the big league club come in and play an exhibition game, and just the support and everything goes along. It was such a cool. I had never actually seen a game in the Memphis ballpark until last year, and I've never seen a game at Hammons Field before. So that's the first thing that I'm looking forward to. From a baseball side of it, I mean, I just want everybody to get out of there healthy. Like, this is a exhibition game, like a Grapefruit League game is, but it's different. I don't think guys are going to be making the team or not making the team based off final performances. The roster I would suspect is largely going to be set going into that game. So I don't know. I'm not trying to like poo-poo the actual,
Sure.
What's going to happen in the game. Even with the starting pitchers right now, what they're doing here in their final starts was they started to bring them back. Like Matthew Libertor, I think, threw 53 pitches, if I have that, 53, 58, somewhere in there in his final start. So you don't want to see anything bad happen. You don't want to see anybody get blown up. But you're facing, like you said, you're facing essentially your AAA team. It's a celebration of baseball to put a bow on spring training and get things going. So is that an okay thing to look forward to?
Sure. Go ahead, Gabe, if
yeah.
you have one more follow-up.
Well, I was as your direction intended there. When I start asking questions about relievers not on the 40-man roster, that means I've run out of questions.
Oh, okay.
So, I think I'm done.
All right. Well, for writer Gabe Simons, I also want to thank Matt for giving us his time. Thank you so much for joining us. We do genuinely appreciate it. You've been more than gracious with us for about an hour now. So you can go follow Matt on X at Matt Pauley on air. Again, you can go and hear him and all of his wonderful shows that he does. He's probably one of the hardest working men on KMOX, and he is everywhere. And Matt does a terrific job. And so, of course, we want to have a conversation with Matt as often as possible. Just again, thank you so much for being here with us, and we look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it anytime.
Absolutely. And again, for writer Gabe Simons, I am your host, Jake Wood. Next week, we will talk to Joe Doyle of Overslot. We're going to be diving into everything draft-related as we've now hit the start of the season. Now we look forward to the next mile marker on the path downward, which is we're going to start looking towards the draft. Of course, the Cardinals have 6 of the top 86 picks, and so, as much draft coverage as we can bring all of you guys, we are going to commit to doing that, as well as all of the great, current Cardinals coverage as well. Once again, for Gabe Simons, for Matt Pauley, my name is Jake Wood. Thank you so much for joining us. We will talk to you all again next week. Have a good week, St. Louis.